Hey, what's going on guys, Terty here, and welcome back to another Minecraft modding tutorial for version 1.15. In this tutorial I'm going to be covering how we can go ahead and add a structure to our game. Now, structures have been very long awaited, people have been waiting for them for a very long time, and I have had a massive bug with them, which I now know the fix to. Now, before I start this, I would just like to mention that none of this code is as such mine. I have got it all from someone called Telepathic Grunt, so massive credit to him for this. All I have done is just gone ahead and refactored a load of stuff and just changed around how a few things work, and then obviously put it in video form, which I know some of you obviously prefer, which is why you're here. So yeah, a massive shout out to him for all this code. He does have it up on GitHub. I will be linking the text tutorial version of this in the description, which will be his if you prefer text tutorials, which is perfectly fine, of course. People learn differently. So let's just go ahead and get started. So the first thing we need to go ahead and do is create our feature in it. So actually I've already created this class right here, but in here this is obviously going to be a deferred register like normal. So that is a public static final deferred register, and that is of feature, and that takes in a question mark. And I'll just call this features, and that is going to be equal to a new deferred register. This takes in forge registries.features, and then it just takes in our mod ID, so that is tutorialmod.modid, and I'm just going to plug this feature into there as well. Just do the good old imports. Make sure you import it from net.minecraft.world.gen.feature, otherwise you'll have an issue there. Now obviously if you're using I think the most recent version of 1.15, or if you're using 1.16, this will be deferred register.create and not a new deferred register. Obviously I haven't updated yet, but that should be coming relatively soon. Okay, so now we obviously need to go ahead and create the registry object. So that will be a public static final registry object, and this just takes in well, mine is going to take in a house structure. So I'm going to be showing you how you can go ahead and create your structures with structure blocks. Obviously you can create them with jigsaws, but they are much more complicated, and I'll be having a tutorial on them in the future, not right now, just because they are a bit more complicated. But yeah, they will be coming in the future. There's a few things I do want to cover before those, but yeah. And obviously there's also structures which you manually have to code placing the blocks. If you prefer those ones, they're pretty easy to do. You don't really even need to make them structures if you don't want to. So yeah, I'm just going to call this house, so because I'm going to be creating a house, of course, and that is going to be equal to features.register. And this first takes in the name, so obviously just house, and then a supplier of a new house structure. And this is going to need to take in an iFeature config. So for that I'm going to put a nofeature config deserialize. Just like that. Obviously we have an error because this class does not exist. And before we go ahead and actually create that class, let's also go ahead and register the iStructure piece type. So because our structure is going to be using pieces, well, ours won't be using pieces, but I'm going to show you how you can use pieces. So pieces basically allow you to have multiple pieces of structure, put them together, and it forms the actual structure itself. So for example, the Woodland Mansion is loads of different pieces, like loads. I think if you have it bigger than a chunk, you need another piece. I think that's how it works. So we just need to annotate this class with @mod.eventBusSubscriber, and this just takes in the bus, which is equal to bus.mod, and it takes in our mod ID, which is equal to tutorialmod.modID, and just go ahead and import those. And then we need a subscribe event, so that will be a public static void register structure pieces, and this is going to take in a registry event dot register, and that just takes in a feature, which obviously takes in question mark. We'll just call that event. Now in here we can call registry.register. This takes in registry.structure piece. Now sadly we can't do this with deferred registries. However, if you are in the latest 1.15, or basically if you're able to use deferred register.create, you can create a custom registry if you want, but I'm not going to be doing that. So yeah. And then for the second parameter, we want to put house in all caps .to lowercase, and that takes in locale.root, if I could spell locale.root. And then for the third parameter, that is just the actual structure piece, so that is going to be it will be called house_piece, which obviously we now need to go ahead and create. I'm just going to create that below the deferred register but above the registry object. So that will just be a public static iStructure piece type, and it's static so we can reference it from the actual piece class, which we haven't created yet, of course. And that's just going to be equal to house pieces dot piece : new. Now we have these errors right here because we haven't created these classes. So if we go into our world and feature package, we can create a new package. Well, I'm going to create a new package. You don't have to create a new package, and I'm just going to call this structures. And in here I'm going to create a house structure. Okay, and this is going to go ahead and extend structure, and that takes in a no feature config. There we go. Just import structure, make sure it is the Minecraft one, of course. Now we want to add the constructor, and I'm just going to rename this to config and change this to config. There we go. And then we want to go ahead and add the unimplemented methods. Now this method right here is basically whether it can be generated or not. Now if this doesn't exist for you, or it doesn't come up like this, it may be called can be generated. So I'm just going to add a little comment above that. So it will be called can be generated if your mappings are up to date. In here, let's just go ahead and rename some of this stuff. So let's call this manager. Let's call this generator. Let's just call this rand. This is the chunk X, and this is the chunk Z. Chunk Z. and this is just the biome, of course. Now in here what we're going to go ahead and do, we first want to get the chunk pos. So chunk pos, we can just call that pos, it doesn't really matter, is equal this dot get start position for position. That takes in the generator, it takes in rand chunk x, chunk x, not chunk z. Make sure you get that right. And then chunk z, and then 0, 0. So if you just hover over here, the last two I believe are an offset, but that might be wrong. I'm pretty sure it's an offset, and obviously we don't want to offset it. And then we need to check if the chunk is valid, so basically whether we can spawn in it. And we can do that by checking if chunk x is equal to pos.x, and do the same for z. So and chunk z is equal to pos.z. Now if that is the case, we need to check if this biome can actually spawn this structure or not, because obviously if it can't spawn this structure, we don't want to spawn the structure, because that doesn't make any sense. So if generator dot has structure, that just takes in the biome and this, because this is the structure. So if it does, then we can just return true, and if neither of those are true, we can just return false, just like that. Then we have the getSize method. Now it appears that this is unused, so I'm actually going to comment that as unused, so we know that it's unused. So we just want to leave that as 0, just in case. Then we have the start factory. So that will just be house structure dot start, which will be a subclass we'll create in a second, colon new. And then we have the structure name, which is just a string. So I'm going to put tutorial mod dot mod id plus and then colon house. Okay. Then we need to actually override this get start position for position method, as we just want to change it around a bit. So let's just refactor some of these things as well, and we don't want to return the super, so we can just get rid of that line right there. So the first one obviously is generator, and then it is rand. Then it is the X pos, the Z pos, and then it is the, yes, I was correct, it is the offset. So it is offset X, and it is offset Y, Z, not Y. We don't mess with Y. So here is where you can do a bit of config if you wish. So you can create a max chunk distance and a min chunk distance. So let's say we set the max distance to 10. Let's say we set the min distance to 3. Okay, so basically what this means is that the houses cannot be closer than 3 chunks, and the houses cannot be further away than 10 chunks. Now obviously if you don't really want this, you can just set the min distance to 0 and set this to something stupid like 9999. It doesn't really matter. I suppose just like 100 would be the max distance, because you're always going to get one between that range anyways. But I'm just going to keep it as 10 and 3 so that we can actually showcase this feature, or at least try to. It's hard to actually show, but yeah. And then it is quite a bit of math, I would say, with actually figuring out what's happening. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy in this math. You can get this from the description. So we just need to change a few things which I called differently than what I had copied. So this is the generator, this we called rand, this we called rand, and this we called rand. Okay, and then we just want to return a new chunk pos. So a new chunk pos, and that takes in the valid chunk x and a valid chunk z. Now, obviously this has an error right here, this get seed modifier. So let's go ahead and create that method, I suppose, shall we? So if we just hover over this, we should be able to create it. Yes, we can. Now this can be protected because we need it in our subclass. And basically what this is, so this is to make sure that it has the same spawn algorithm. So it's basically some random stuff, but it makes sure it's always the same algorithm that it uses. So we just want to make this a really big number which is unique to this structure. So I don't know, I'm just going to type some random numbers here. Just make sure it is an integer and that you don't go over the integer limit, because obviously that won't work. Now if your biome only spawns in your dimension, or only spawns basically in your chunk generator, you can now go ahead and override the get spawn list method, which will allow you to spawn your entity in here or add your spawns to it. However, because our biome also spawns in the overworld, this isn't going to work. Well, it's not going to work for our overworld biome anyways. So the best way to do this is to actually use an event and not this method, since this isn't calculated when the chunk generator, since basically the chunk generator doesn't check for this structure because it doesn't know that it exists, so we can't use this. However, we can use an event, so there is an event, I'm not sure what it's called. If we just Control Shift T, I think there should be some spawn event. I'm not sure. I'm sure I have put the event on screen right now anyways, because I'm not sure off the top of my head exactly what it's called. So the next thing we want to do is create this start class. So that will be a public static class start, and this just extends structure start. There we go. Oh, I don't know what I just did. Oh, I deleted a bracket. That's what I did. Okay. In here we want to add the constructor and add the unimplemented methods. And as you can see, we've got to do some refactoring here. So the first one is just obviously the structure. The second one is the chunk X. Then it is the chunk Z. Then it is just the bounding box of the structure. Then it is a reference as an int to the structure. And then it is a long, which is just the seed. And let's just paste these into the super real quick. So structure chunk X, chunk Z, bounding box, then reference, and then seed. Okay, Then we want to go into the init method right here, and in here we basically this is basically where we put the pieces together. So it's what it does when the structure starts spawning, basically. So we first need to go ahead and create the rotation. So rotation is equal rotation dot values, and then we can get it from this dot rand dot next int, and that will be rotation dot values dot length. This just allows us to choose a random rotation for the structure. Obviously, if you always want it to be a specific rotation, you can just do rotation dot clockwise, whatever. But we can just choose a random one. Then we need to go ahead and convert the chunk X and chunk Z to actual positions, so it will be the center of the chunk. So positions that we can use basically in a block pos. So to do that, we use int X, and then we just need to use I think it's called bitewise operations. I think that's what they call it. I'm not too familiar with them, but I kind of understand what's happening. So it shifts it left by 4, I think, and then it adds 7 to get the center of the chunk as a block pos. I'm not entirely sure how it works. I think I kind of understand how it works. But it's not really too big of an issue because you don't ever want to change this as such. So that is something you want to keep the same, unless you don't want it to spawn in the center of a chunk for some reason. I don't know why that would be, but... And then we can create the Y, which is obviously slightly different. So that will be generator.func, and I believe it is C, func C. That just takes in X and Z, and then the height map. I'm going to use height map dot world dot type. I mean type dot world surface WG. However, obviously, if you want to, you can go ahead and experiment with these different height maps if you wish. I'm just going to use WG because that's basically the recommended one for structures, I would say. And then we can obviously easily create a block pos from these X, Y, Z. So new block pos X, Y, Z. Oh, not YU. There we go. And then we can actually start putting the pieces together. So that can just be house pieces, which is obviously a class we haven't created yet, dot start. That just takes in the template manager, the block pos, the rotation, and this dot components, which is the different pieces, and this dot rand. And after it's done that, we want to recalculate the structure size, so that basically sets it to the new structure size containing all the other pieces as well, since the current structure size only takes into account for the first piece, and by recalculating it takes into account for all the pieces. And then obviously if you want, you can go ahead and log the position of it so we know where it is. I'm just going to do this so I can find it a bit quicker, just like that. And that is it. Obviously we have an error because we haven't created this class. We have an error in here because we haven't imported. Okay, let's go ahead and create the house pieces class. Okay, this class is not going to actually extend anything, but in here we basically put the pieces together. So we can create a private static final resource location, and I'm going to call this part 1 is equal to a new resource location. This takes in our mod ID, so tutorial mod.mod ID, and then house, or whatever the name of the exported part is. Now, if you want, well, I assume you do, if you're actually going to use multiple pieces, then you can just create a second part quite simply, and then just do that. I'm not actually going to use multiple pieces, so I'm just going to comment that second part out and show you how you could use it if you had multiple pieces. So then we can create a private static final map of resource location, and also the block pos, and we can call this the offset, and that'll be equal to immutable map. Immutable map, there it is. And just delete these generics. We can be raw here. Of, and this can take in our part 1, and then a new block pos 0 1 0. Okay, and then obviously if you wanted a second part, so let's just say I had this second part, we can copy this and we can paste it, change it to part 2, and obviously that would work fine. I'm just going to go ahead and comment this out, so it will still be in my GitHub if you need to see how you can do it. Oh, I need to comment out the comma as well. There we go. Okay, then we can go ahead and create this start method. So that was a public static void start. That took in the template manager, which I'm just going to call manager. Then a block pos, which will be the pos. Then it took in the rotation, which I'm going to call rot, and then it took in a list of structure piece, and we can call that pieces. Oh dear. And then it took a random, which I'm going to call rand, and let's just import those things. Okay. Now in here we want to just get the x and z pos, so int x is equal pos.x, pos.getx, int z is equal pos.getz, and just remove this there we go. Then we can create a block pos rotation offset is equal to a new block pos 0 0 0 dot rotate, and that can take in the rotation, and then we can go ahead and create a block pos from that. So block pos is equal to rotation offset dot add, that takes in the x, pos.get y and z, and then you can just add that to the pieces. So pieces dot add a new house pieces dot piece, which we haven't created yet, which takes in the manager part 1, so this is the part that we're messing with, then block pos and rotation, which is rot. Okay, now obviously if you have a second one, you can go ahead and decide how much to offset it by. So I will just use the example that Telepathic Grunt has, for his on the second one, but obviously it might be slightly different for you. So he actually uses a -10 on the X right here, and then if we have a look, let's just make this on a correct line. Yeah, and then it's the same except it uses the second part that we have. Okay, then let's just go ahead and create this piece class really quickly. So that is a public static class piece extends template structure piece. Now, instead of writing this all out, since we don't want to be changing any of this really, I'm just going to copy it all in. So this whole piece class will be in the description. Now here, you don't want to change anything other than this method right here. So this is handling the data markers. So basically with structure blocks, you're able to set data markers and give them a name. So let's say you set one to chest. You can check if it equals whatever this takes in, and then it sets that block state to a chest, and then it checks if it's a chest. So here is basically you can set a loot table for the chest. Now obviously it doesn't have to be a chest, it can be a spawner, a furnace, basically anything with data. You can actually set it here instead of doing it in the world, but either is fine, because obviously you can set a chest with a loot table in the world instead of doing it here, but that shouldn't be too much of an issue really. Now this method right here, so this is actually the create method. If your mappings are up to date, it will be create and not this function thing right there. So you will just need to change that if you're on a later version. But that is now it, pretty much. Let's just import our pieces. Now the final thing, and probably the most obvious thing to everyone, we haven't created the structure. Now I'm not going to show you how to create the structure. There's hundreds of tutorials on how you can go ahead and create a structure with structure blocks. Well, yeah, actually use structure blocks to export it. But once you have the different pieces, if you're using multiple pieces of course, you just want to put that in data tutorial mod and then structures. And in here, as you can see, I put house.mbt in there, and in the house pieces, you can see that we read house and obviously house 2 if we had a second part. But yeah, there's a bunch of tutorials. I'll link probably 1 or 2 in the description for how you can create a structure block, how you can create a structure from a structure block if you wish. Now obviously the final thing we have to do is actually add the structure. So before we do that, actually I suppose we should init it. So just like all our other deferred registries, we can call feature init.features register. Let's say it's in the mod event bus. That will just register our features for us, so we don't have to go ahead and do that ourselves. Now I'm going to create a new class in Gen, and I'm going to call this structure, I suppose feature, no, structure Gen. You know what, let's just do it, yeah, let's just call it here, sure. I was thinking about doing it in the orgen, but it's slightly weird. So we can actually just copy our orgen right here, and instead of checking if it's planes, we can just check if it's our biome. So example biome.get, and instead of all of this configured placement and jazz, we can go ahead. Okay, so what you do is you can do biome.add feature, add structure, and that will be feature init dot house dot get dot with configuration, and that takes in ifeature config dot no feature config. Okay, and basically you need to add the feature to every biome, but only add the structure to the biomes you want it to spawn in. And this is to make sure it doesn't spawn across chunks, because obviously that would be a slight issue, because otherwise it will cut off at chunks and then you get a bunch of issues. So basically what happens is add structure. It tells Minecraft that the biome can start the generation of the structure. So this actually starts the generation. And then biome.add feature tells Minecraft that the pieces can be made in that biome. So we need to call biome.add feature outside of this if statement, and we want to do decoration surface structures, since they're surface structures. Obviously if they're underground you can do that, but you would have to have changed a lot of code for that. And then it is just feature init dot house dot get dot with configuration. It once again takes in ifeature config dot no feature config, and then we can do with placement, placement dot nope is the one we want, and then we can configure that placement to iPlacement config dot no placement config, just like that, and that should basically work. So I'm actually now going to run the game, and I will see you guys there. Okay, yes, I am very stupid. I figured something was completely wrong because this worked perfectly earlier. So if we go into our structure gen, as you can see, I'm not calling this anywhere. So we just need to go into our main class, go into our setup right here, and in here we can just call structure gen. Structure gen colon generate, well, I called it generate, or generate structures. Let's go into there, generate structures, and obviously make sure you're calling this. So actually that's on register biomes. No, that's not. That's setup. So make sure you are calling setup right here by adding it as a listener to the mod event bus, and then when you close and reopen the... Okay, so as you can see, if you just check the log down here, you can see it's already said we can find a house at blah blah blah, find a house at blah blah blah. So that's 2, then there's 4 more. Yeah, as the chunks keep generating, it's gonna find more. So let's teleport to 777. So /tp at S777, and we should see our house. So this is my amazing house. It's a bit floaty. Obviously you can fix that because you can do fillers below it if you wish. The majority of it is on flat ground, as you can see, so that is why the front isn't. So it's okay. This is more meant to be a ruined house anyways, but if you can do what vanilla does if you wish, so it adds basically filler blocks below anywhere where there's air below it. So you can do that if you want to. because getting it to generate on actually flat ground is very hard. So as you can see, I have the entity spawned in here, so that's nice. The furnace has items in it because I set it to have items in it. So just as a quick tour, you come through here, you've got a nice staircase. You've got your bed with a nice orange carpet around it with a shelf and a pro lamp. You see, it doesn't look like a mushroom on a flower pot at all. You've got your furnace, you've got your crafting table, you've got 2 lit furnaces with coal in them, which is nice. You've got some chests with generated loot, so if I actually control middle click, I think. Yeah, so if we open this, you can see it's some nice loot. Obviously it isn't actually generated because it's different from if I do that. By the way, if you didn't know you can do that, you can control middle click a chest. So if I just place this one down and control middle click, then it will basically give us random things every time, which is pretty pog. And because I've set a loot table to the chest, I didn't know you could do that. Maybe everyone knew that you could do that other than me, but yeah. So we've got some nice windows, of course. We can see out into the land of the weird dimension. But yeah, that's about it. So we now have structures spawning, and as you can actually see, it's working in the desert biome. So if I'm right here, should be able to see the biome is beach. No, not desert, it's beach. But over here it is our example biome. So it's spawned in our example biome, but that has actually gone ahead and perfectly worked fine in the desert biome, or beach biome, I suppose it's calling it. So yeah, that's quite nice. We do now know it works. And there should be a chunk boundary here as well, so what's chunk boundaries? Let's have a look. F3 and G. We should see it is able to cross chunk boundaries, which was a massive issue we had previously, but obviously that works perfectly now. So yeah, it's actually in 4 different chunks, which is very neat. And it's having no issue converting between them. So yeah, if you guys did enjoy this tutorial, please do be sure to smash your face into that like button and subscribe. If you really enjoyed, please do be sure to share it. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.
Oops, my system crashed. I lost my data, but I had an antivirus. Antivirus is not enough. You need Protegent, world's only antivirus with data recovery software. Think beyond antivirus. Think Protegent.
Are you coding, son?